Welcome to Hot Reads, our weekly look at the NFL with Hall of Fame quarterback Troy Aikman. I'm Scott Ridge, pro football editor here at Sporting News. And Troy, we're going to start in the NFC East. It's a big week with Philadelphia traveling to Dallas. Eagles come in kind of equal parts confident and desperate. The Cowboys control their own destiny. They've had extra time to prepare for this game. I want to ask you, Troy, as a player, do weeks like this when the stakes are so high, you intensify the preparations, or do you try to keep it as normal as possible? And are players aware of the pressure?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that you stay within the same routine, pretty much throughout the year, but especially when you get to this time of the season, if anything, you maybe pull back a little bit to give guys a little bit more of a break. But, whenever you're a team that's in the playoff picture, like these two teams are, I think the practices become much more focused. They certainly did back when I was playing, because guys now know what's in front of them and what's at stake. You go through an entire offseason of training, getting yourself ready for a season. You go into the season, it's a long year, as we all know, and you don't really know, especially these days more so than ever. You have high expectations, but can you pull it together? And to be playing in late December with a chance to go on and play in the postseason is an exciting time, not only for these two teams, but all the teams around the league that are in the same position.
You mentioned playing in late December. Is now the time to introduce any new wrinkles into the schemes, or is it pretty much work on what you know and perfect what you're good at?
Yeah, I think teams will continue to do the things that they're best at. Having said that, each and every week, a team will have a few different looks. There will be a different blitz that each of these teams will show that they haven't maybe shown in the last 4 or 5 games, maybe something they haven't shown all season long. There will be a few trick plays within the game plan to maybe give themselves a chance for a big play. But, by and large, these teams are where they're at because they're not fooling anybody. They're just playing pretty sound football and beating the people across the line from them, and that's not going to change. I think if you look at the Cowboys and why they've been successful, when they have been successful, it's been because Tony Romo has been playing exceptional football. He's going to have to continue to play well for this team to have a chance to win in this ball game. For Philadelphia, what's hurt them all season long is the turnovers. They've got to be able to not turn the ball over like they did the first time these two teams met. And I really think that, scaling it down to its simplest forms, those are going to be the real keys for both of these teams to win.
And Troy, I want to talk about the Giants. They faced the Jets on Saturday. It's one of those New York games. There's been some trash talking going back and forth, but I want to talk about the NFC East. You know this division as well as anybody. How's it going to unfold over the final 2 weeks of the season? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, there's, let's start with Philadelphia first of all. I mean, they've won their last 2 games. It's been a disappointing season overall. The fact that they're even in the picture, with 2 games to play is somewhat remarkable. Some would say that they're a real long shot in order to make it into the postseason. They've got to have some things fall in place for them, but I don't think it's unrealistic to think that those things could happen. Of course, they've got to win against Dallas. They then have to win the last game of the season, and then the Giants have to finish 8-8 along with the Cowboys. But that can certainly happen. What's interesting for the Giants is that this is a team that has lost 5 of their last 6 games. And the fact that we are still talking about them controlling their destination is amazing. So a huge loss last week after a big win against the Cowboys. If they win their last 2 games of the season, starting this week against the New York Jets, and then are able to beat Dallas, they win the NFC East. Same holds true for the Cowboys. They control their destination as well. So I think it's shaken up to be an awfully good finish, depending on what happens this weekend. But all 3 of these teams, certainly Dallas and the Giants, because they control their destiny, they've got the best shot of getting in. But I wouldn't rule out the Eagles either, especially if they're able to win a game this weekend.
Staying in the NFC, I want to talk to you about Green Bay, Troy. The team doesn't have to worry about keeping its perfect record intact, but they still got work to do securing home field. The loss last Sunday in Kansas City, is that a blessing in disguise, or is it more of a red flag when it comes this late in the season?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know that it's it's really either. To be honest with you, I'm not one of those guys who believes that losing is good. Having said that, though, it at least takes out of the equation their goal and interest of going undefeated. Because if they did get into a position going in the last game of the season and they'd wrapped up home field advantage. And yet, if they did want to try to go for perfection, do you risk getting someone hurt? Fortunately for them, last week Aaron Rodgers came out of that game okay, but as we know, there's some issues along the offensive line with the injuries that they suffered there, and then of course Greg Jennings, who went down the week before that. So there's some concern with regards to their health. And first of all, they've got to wrap up home field advantage throughout the playoffs. I think then at that time, Mike McCarthy will take a little bit of a different look at this thing and say, okay, what do we have to do to make sure they're fresh? If they are able to rest the last game of the season, then of course they'd have that week off, and then they'd have the wild card round off. So that's a long time for football players to have a couple of weeks off in order to rest. That's good. But as far as there being some type of blueprint or red flags or anything of that nature because of the loss there at Kansas City, although they didn't play well, I don't think so. I still think this team is the best team in the NFC.
Finally, Drew Brees can set the all-time mark for passing yards in a season Monday night against the Falcons. Saints are number 1 in offense, number 1 in passing, and incredibly, they're 8th in rushing. Troy, you've been on teams that were as unstoppable as any. Tell us what it takes to reach this level of proficiency on offense.
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, they've got good players across the board. That offensive line probably doesn't get talked enough about, and that's the case really across the league because the skill players are the ones that we're all focused on. But they've been outstanding. They've been able to remain relatively healthy. And then, of course, with Drew Brees and the way that he's playing, the wide receivers on the outside, Jimmy Graham coming on and having a unbelievable season. Darren Sproles has really helped them, and Pierre Thomas has done some nice things as well. What's remarkable is they've run the ball, as you said. They're in the top 10 in terms of rushing yardage per game, and yet here Drew Brees is going to break Dan Marino's all-time passing record, and to be able to both run the ball that effectively and throw the ball, unlike anything we've really seen ever in the history of the game, tells you that they're getting a lot of offensive snaps as well. So, that's the big key. Great players, and then the fact that they've played together for a long period of time other than Darren Sproles and Jimmy Graham, and they've fit in very, very well. But these wide receivers and Drew Brees, they are on the same page, and it's a great thing to watch. I mean, a few weeks ago, we were looking at this situation and saying, okay, Aaron Rodgers is by far the MVP candidate. I think he still is, but Drew Brees has to be mentioned in that conversation. And I really feel that if I were a voter, I'm certainly not, if I were a voter, I think there'd be a co-MVP this year, both Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees, and that's not unprecedented. We've seen that before. But for a guy to break a record that has been in existence for 27 years, is pretty remarkable, and I think he should at least share the MVP honors for the season.
Thanks, Troy. Great insights as always. Happy holidays to you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great. Thanks.